Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Another day. Happy Joe Biden's in the White House. Today, Joe Biden brought together labor leaders from across the country, business leaders, not just the AFL-CIO, but the Chamber of Commerce as well, and they all got into a room. And they found some common ground, things that we could be united on, things that we could do in a bipartisan fashion, things that we should have done 4, 8, 12, 16 years ago. And everybody talks about. Everyone says, we can agree on this. Common ground, overwhelmingly popular with the public, just no-brainer kind of stuff. That's right. Infrastructure. And I said from the beginning, if those who've been listening long enough, if Donald Trump had chosen to invest heavily in infrastructure, stop with the attacks on the Obamacare and all of that, stop with that, but actually had gone through with, hey, let's get those bridges fixed. Let's get the roads fixed. Let's get broadband access into rural communities. Let's get broadband access into urban communities. Let's invest in 21st century infrastructure that's going to make the country much, much, much more competitive, much, much, much easier to navigate, and give us a fighting chance into the 21st century against the Chinese. Just a thought. But as I said, should have been done 4 years ago, should have been done 8 years ago, 12, 16, 20, 24, should have been done a long time ago. Because we got so much to get to. In fact, the American Society of Civil Engineers repeatedly put out their studies that say, hey, America, if your kid came home with the kind of report card that we're giving you for infrastructure, you would kick his behind. Or at least I know my parents would have. My mother would have beat me senseless if I came home with a D+. And I know, as Chris Farley's character in Tommy Boy said, it's not a grade they like to give out very often. A D+. D+. The only sector of our economy that got a B, no A's whatsoever, and infrastructure. The only thing that got a B was our rail lines, because there's moneyed interests in that. The moneyed people want our rail lines to work. Got to get freight from one part of the country to the other. Heavily invest in that. Everything else, not so good. Our waterways need help. Our sewers need help. Our water systems need lots of help. Go down the list. Our airports need help. And, every time I talk about infrastructure, I have to bring up Thomas Friedman, whom I do not like very much, but, had an interesting comment. He said when he came from Beijing to LAX, it was like going from the Jetsons to the Flintstones. We, the Flintstones. We're the ones he was calling the Flintstones. So the fact that today Joe Biden brought together labor leaders and business leaders and how to move forward in his Build Back Better plan, what we need to invest in, how we're going to begin to invest in it, and the promise to keep the pressure on, those people in Congress. And I would argue Republicans. And this is something that even business leaders are saying, hey, Republicans, we need investment. How about some of that? And the labor leaders are going, hey, it's going to be good for everybody. It's going to create jobs. And those jobs should be what? Good paying, family sustained wage union jobs, which is why you saw an overwhelmingly large number of building trades representatives there today, talking about, hey, how do we get the investment? They're ready. Let's go. We got members that need work. We got future members that are going to need work. We got lots of unemployed people. We got lots of underemployed people. Let's go. All we have to do is pass the legislation. And I guess it's like anything. We've got sticks in the mud. We've got people who don't believe in government and are in our government for no other reason than to stop things. That was the whole Tea Party movement, if you remember it. The whole Tea Party movement was to stop anything from happening. Nothing's going to change. And what these folks are saying is, look, we need to invest. We need to invest heavily in this stuff. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I'm really thrilled about, and I love the fact that Joe Biden is doing so much on the labor front that I'm thrilled with. And I'm going to get to a couple of those things here in a minute. But one of the things today that that Biden did is he issued another executive order, undoing the executive order of Donald Trump that created an industry-based apprenticeship program with of course, federal money, but no real federal oversight. And when I saw the story, I'm going, aw, poor Ivanka, because this was Ivanka's thing back in 2017. She was going around the country going, oh, we're gonna have these wonderful apprenticeship programs, and they're gonna be just like those union ones that train really competent, highly skilled people who get really high wage jobs and great benefits. It's gonna be like that, only without the high skill, the high wages, or the good benefits. This is where they were pushing this. So I'm happy to see that done. Now, here's the thing. I'm a big fan of apprenticeship programs. I'm a big fan of employer-employee group apprenticeship programs where you are on equal footing and you negotiate on equal footing and you pursue the best talent and you train people to be their best. And you pay them while they're learning. This is one of those things where I tell my kids, you don't have to go to college if you want. We'll get you through college, but become an electrician, become a plumber, become a HVAC person. Learn the trades, a pipe fitter, glazer, whatever. These people make really good money and have solid benefits and have a portable skill that, look, that job goes away, you're always going to be able to figure out how to do something. Because sadly in this country, we've lost so many people who can do things. And this is one of those moments where this is a great opportunity to bring those skills back, to ramp up real apprenticeship programs where people end up graduating on the other side with actual skills that are portable. Sadly, and the research bears this out, when you have industry-led apprenticeship programs, the rates of completion are pathetically low. And the skill level is lower, as are, of course, the wages, the benefits, and all the other stuff. So for me, this is a good sign. It's a good sign that Joe Biden is doing a lot and doing it very quickly. Because as I've been saying, look, I'm happy with what he's done so far. I think Biden has done more for labor in the, what are we, just under a month into his administration. I mean, the fact that he fired Peter Robb on day one for me was enough. That was, I'm good now. Thanks. Now we can go do the other stuff. But today he also nominated Jennifer Bruzio, who is an attorney for the communication workers, to be the next NLRB general counsel. This is the replacement for Peter Robb. So we've gone from Peter Robb, who was a guy who was a corporate side lawyer, who was a union buster, he was a part of the Patco firings during the Regan years, to somebody who now sees the NLRB's job and mission as it's supposed to be, to help promote collective bargaining, to help people organize, and to do it in a way that is with not the kind of intimidation we're seeing happening in Alabama with the Amazon workers, not the kind of intimidation that we've seen in countless organizing campaigns, from captive meetings to unjust firings, to you name it, constantly being berated with mailings and all kinds of stuff. In fact, at the Amazon plant in Alabama, you can't even go to the bathroom without being inundated with anti-union propaganda. So now you got a woman then who's, I hope you're going to make it through, and I think she will, who's going to take the mission of the National Labor Relations Board and move it forward so people have the ability to join and form unions. I think this is a good thing. And, I had this conversation yesterday, just yesterday, in fact, with someone who said, well, Joe Biden hasn't done anything yet. I'm going, he's not even been in office a month. And you're saying he hasn't done anything yet. I go, have you looked for anything? And the answer was, well, I don't see anything. I'm going, well, let me let you in a little something. I'm thrilled with what he's done so far because we no longer have Eugene Scalia as head of the Department of Labor. Marty Walsh, the mayor of Boston, former union leader, he has been appointed, and it looks like he's going to make it through the confirmation process. Also, billionaire Betsy, gone. I mean, from an education standpoint, you go, yeah, billionaire Betsy going, good thing. You got this guy, Miguel Cardona, who was a former elementary school teacher. Think about this for a second. You've gone from billionaire Betsy, who couldn't find a school, to a guy who was actually in a classroom teaching kids for a decade. Who do you want leading up the Department of Education? I would go with the person who actually taught, focused their entire career on education. Not someone who ideologically wanted to give money to church schools, and that's the reason she has anything to do with education. Not her. Someone who fundamentally despises public education. It's kind of like, I saw this great clip the other day. Tucker Carlson had Rick Perry on, and Tucker Carlson was asking him about what's going on in Texas. And by the time he let Rick Perry answer, his internet went down. Everything froze. You just saw, Rick Perry with his mouth going, oh, like he's got some weird look on his face because he froze. And I go, that is priceless, because you had somebody. Again, this is what happens when Republicans take the White House. They put people into positions that they want to destroy. Rick Perry, actually, if you remember, during the debates where he had the famous oops moment, he went through and the places that he wanted, there were 5 places he wanted to eliminate. The only one that he really remembered was energy. He remembered that, forgot education, forgot some of the other ones. In fact, had Ron Paul shouting things out at him to try and help him remember. It's like, yeah, I know I'm against them and I know I want to destroy them, but I don't remember them. Oops. And guess what? George Bush made him Secretary of Energy. And what did he do? He destroyed it. So again, when we have Republican presidents, they put people into positions of power who their goal, their mission is to make things worse. So to see billionaire Betsy gone, to see Eugene Scalia, another corporate lawyer union buster, gone, I am thrilled by that. That is a fantastic thing, something we should be celebrating. The fact that right now there's going to be a guy who has spent his entire life working in the steel industry and working to make workplaces safer. This guy, James Frederick, who had been the head of the safety department at the steelworkers. He was the health and safety and environmental head there at the steelworkers. He's now going to be leading up OSHA. To actually have someone who understands what OSHA means, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, passed in 1970 to protect workers on the job, keep them from dying or being killed, or worse yet, being exposed to stuff that's going to kill them over the next 50 years. Having someone who really cares, oh my goodness, that's like a complete game changer. Another name, just so, and I hope you share my excitement in this, that we're going to actually get people who want to do good things. I know, hard to believe, but we're now going to have a woman in charge of the wage and hour division, this Jessica Lohman, who actually is someone who doesn't want people to get cheated out of their wages, as opposed to the Trump appointee who actually stole wages from her employees. Are you getting kind of a drift here? Because, I think it's important to understand that we want people, especially as working people, we want people in these positions who actually are going to do their jobs. I know it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that there are actually people who do that. But man, it's what we need. I guess, again, head of the Equal Opportunity Commission. You've got a lawyer who, this Ernest Dubster, who is going to be the chairman of the FLRA, the Federal Labor Relations Authority. That's another good thing. You go down the list of all the people that Trump has replaced who are going to do just great work for us. And it's fantastic. And I'm hearing all these stories. There are hundreds of people, hundreds of Trump's patronage appointees being shown the door. And maybe we get to have trust again in our government. Maybe we get to have some faith that when things go wrong, there's going to be someone there. Maybe, and I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we're going to once again believe in our government. Believe that the people who are there are going to be functional and competent and ready to do the right thing. Incredible. And that we're going to pursue policies that are going to be good for us. Like, I don't know, having the Occupational Safety and Health Administration have a policy on COVID sounds like a pretty good idea. Something maybe we should have done a year ago. Not happening until now. We've got so much to do and so little time to do it. And an administration, a previous administration that had no interest. Their idea of dealing with regulation was destroying them. As where I think Joe Biden's administration is about how do we protect people. And that's the difference. It's about, for this administration, the way it's looking right now, it's about people over profit. It's about the working people of this country getting a fair shake. And like I said, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled by the fact that we're going to start talking about infrastructure investments. And maybe we get some shovel-ready projects. Maybe we start making shovel-ready projects. Maybe we start thinking outside the box and really doing the kind of things that we need to transform our economy, to transform the jobs of our economy, and to really, really make this a better place for our kids. Looking forward to it. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back and talk a little bit about childhood poverty, how we end that. I know, what a great topic. And it's a thing that we need to address. Quick break. Right back after this.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So one of the things that I'm excited about over the next couple of weeks is the fact that out of this $1.9 trillion rescue plan that's hopefully going to have some survival checks in it, hopefully going to have money for state and local governments to get through this pandemic, and of course, the money that we need to get the shots, to get the vaccines, to get the infrastructure, to get this stuff out. Really thrilled about it. But the bigger part is, how do we use this opportunity to transform the future? How do we make people's lives better? Because I've been saying from the beginning, Biden's got about 6 months. People's lives have got to get immediately better and quick. And we use smart public policy and good spending, good investment to do it. One of the things and one of the areas I find most interesting and I think really important is ending childhood poverty. We've got way too many kids living in poverty right now, and Biden's got a plan to cut that in half within the first year, which I got to tell you, extremely ambitious on FDR level ambition. And here to share some thoughts on that, I've asked Alex Cawthorne Gaines to come talk with us. She's the Vice President for Poverty to Prosperity there at the Center for American Progress. Alex, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So, I'm looking at this, and I got to tell you, the idea that in 1 year's time, Biden's goal is to cut childhood poverty in half is enormous. I mean, this is FDR, LBJ kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And the reality is, child poverty has been persistently high for a very long time, even where in the last 5 years, I think prior to the pandemic, we were seeing the poverty rate actually go down for 5 years in a row. child poverty still remained high. And so I think it's hugely admirable and a huge gift to our community, our advocacy community, that this is a focus of President Biden.
Yeah, let's talk about, because a lot of people go, well, what is childhood poverty? So what is the definition that we go by? I think about myself growing up. I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. We weren't food insecure. We didn't have any food in the house. We were flat out hungry. We didn't have fancy words. I don't think people care about those. But what is the definition that we're using today on childhood poverty?
So there's a specific definition based on a threshold calculated by the federal government for poverty. But I should say that threshold is woefully outdated, right? Like, we basically calculate poverty based on a definition from 1963. And that definition based essentially what people could afford, like a healthy, affordable food basket for 4 people, as defined by what it would cost in 1955. So we have a measure that is actually really outdated. But what I like to focus on is what poverty really means. What our mental model is at this point is not consistent with what it really means on a day-to-day basis for families. So even, for example, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I think it's something roughly like $18,000 to $20,000 a year for a family of 4. But we know that if you're making $21,000, even $25,000 a year, you're likely struggling to make ends meet, that you're making really difficult choices and sacrifices, right? So you may be sacrificing buying, some additional groceries for the week because you have a dental procedure that your child really needs. You may be, in fact, sacrificing paying a utility bill on time, the heating bill, the cooling bill, because your rent is due and you're some dollars short. Those are the tangible things that we should be focusing on and thinking about when we think about poverty. And we certainly, recognize or should recognize that people who are above, particularly immediately above, 200% above even our federal definition of poverty, are really struggling to make ends meet on a day-to-day basis.
No, and one of the things that I had a guest on a while ago talking about homelessness, and one of the things that was a surprise to me is their view was the number one reason for homelessness, in the current times, is someone's car broke down, and I'm going, I never thought of that. As you said, dental work being done, some minor emergency that is a major setback could make people end up homeless and end up living in poverty, or just look, you don't make enough money because the minimum wage in this country has been stagnant for more than a decade.
And I recall reading something. This is again from before the pandemic, but it said something to the effect of that 43% of respondents to this survey, and sort of extrapolated to the whole population of working adults, could not afford a $400 emergency without going into credit card debt they couldn't pay off, or without reaching out to a family friend, right? And of those folks, there was a significant percentage that actually, in fact, had no means to pay for that $400 emergency. So that could be a car breaking down. That could be a stove or an oven not working. And in fact, those are actually more expensive. I had to replace mine recently. That could be your refrigerator going up. Any kind of thing that you actually need done and you need immediately in your household that needs to be attended to, you don't have the resources to pay for that. And so that's where we talk about the fact that there are sacrifices that have to be made on a day-to-day basis that impact people's children, that impact their ability to be good parents, when you're talking about poverty. Yeah,
and to highlight that, that same study, I think, said somewhere around a little over 60% of people couldn't afford $1,000 emergency.
Right.
So you start looking at, start thinking about where you are in this scale, and the majority of us are in a position where it's one hiccup that could cause major catastrophes, which is why I think it's important that we talk about, how do we get to a place where there is a safety net in this country, that, people who are working hard, who are playing by the rules, can actually sustain and maybe even, hopefully at some point get ahead, like I used to believe hard work could do for you. So what are you advocating as how we move to a place where Biden can be successful in eliminating half of child poverty in the next year?
Well, a big headline from that $1.9 trillion package, the American Rescue Plan, is the inclusion of expanding the child tax credit. That particular policy alone could actually make that impact on poverty that we're talking about. So sort of taking a step back and explaining what the child tax credit is, it currently provides about $2,000 to qualifying parents with dependents under the age of 17, but it's not fully refundable, which means that up to $1,400 of that credit could be received as a refund, where, in cases where the credit is worth more than what a person owes in taxes. But in the American Rescue Plan, there is an effort to make the credit fully refundable, particularly for this year. So in 2021, it's not permanent, but temporarily, which means that all families could receive the full amount of the credit, except for those that have very high incomes that would be phased out of receiving that. So some of the other really quick facts on this: it increases the basic amount of the credit from $2,000 to $3,000. It extends the credit to 17-year-olds for the first time. And really, really importantly, it provides an additional $600 for families that have children under the age of 6. CAP really had a huge advocacy effort going some years back on making the child tax credit fully refundable, paid monthly, and inclusive of a young child component, because parents really, have huge costs in raising children in their most formative years and typically have less income at that time. So that's a huge, huge win. But these changes taken together have been calculated to actually dramatically cut child poverty rates. I think a study from Columbia actually said that this could move an estimated 4 million children out of poverty and cut deep poverty among children in half. And so that's where a lot of the excitement from the community of folks that are particularly focused on child poverty is coming from. It's around this particular provision.
Now, a lot of people will go, "Oh, this is just socialism, Alex. Socialism. You leftist commies want to be giving stuff away." And I like to remind people that the Earned Income Tax Credit signed into law by Ronald Reagan, the sainted Ronald Reagan, took this idea from the sainted Uncle Milton Friedman, who had the idea of a negative tax, which would have given people free money. So this was a very conservative idea in its founding, even though we've lost conservatism in this country. But that was its history.
That's right. I mean, the reality is this credit would be available to working and non-working families, but there are costs associated with working, right? There are people, and particularly if you look at this pandemic, there are lots of women who have left the workforce because of insufficient childcare, right? And so this sort of credit, particularly because it's going to be delivered on a monthly basis, you don't have to wait till tax time to get one big refund. You would get it on a monthly basis. These are things that could go toward childcare expenses, maybe go toward the fare that you need for public transportation to get to a job site, to go to interviews, things like that. It costs money to work in this country as well. It's not, there's expenses that come with that. So I would argue that this is something that's incredibly helpful for workforce attachment for people who are having challenges, even meeting their basic needs to be able to get on that bus or catch an Uber or what have you, to get to work or to go to an interview.
Right. Now, again, I like to focus on the fact that, this isn't hippie liberalism. This isn't socialism. That, its founding was in Milton Friedman's negative tax, much like the idea of a universal basic income was a conservative idea to make sure that people had a floor that a consumer-based economy needs consumers. Now, he was looking at it from a business perspective, whereas where I think you and I would both look at it as this is a people thing. We need to make sure that people aren't going to go hungry, and that, look, it may not look like it now, but when I was a kid, we went to the cupboards and there was nothing there at the end of the month. And that was our entire neighborhood. And I don't think any child should go through that. So any way that we can make sure that kids don't go to bed hungry and parents don't have to look into their eyes and know they're hungry, for me is something we should be moving on.
Absolutely. And I should say that, this plan actually is seeing some bipartisan support. And in fact, some of your listeners may be aware that Senator Romney actually introduced a bill a couple of weeks back called the Family Security Act. I should say, I think there's a bit of confusion because it's not an expansion of the child tax credit, as I talked about. This would actually replace the child tax credit with a flat monthly allowance that would be paid out to all parents. It's not something that would be delivered through the IRS. And his plan is actually delivered through the Social Security Administration. And in fact, it's even a bit more generous. Parents of kids ages 0 to 5 would get $350 a month, which actually goes up to $4,200 a year. And then parents of kids 6 to 17 would get $250 a month or $3,000 a year. So it's a little bit more generous. The difference between this plan, though, and what's in the current American Rescue Plan or the $1.4 trillion relief package is that this plan is permanent, but it's paid for by eliminating other programs that low-income households benefit from. So, for example, it would actually eliminate the EITC except for the one for adult dependents. It would eliminate the child and dependent care tax credit. It would eliminate TANF, which replaced traditional cash welfare after the 1996 reform law. It will replace the the SALT tax is the acronym, but the state and local tax deduction. and the income tax. So it's paid for, by an assortment of things, but particularly programs that actually would that benefit our lowest income families. So that's a concern to us. I mean, I think it's exciting to see the bipartisan support, but we don't necessarily want to pay for programs that benefit low income people by cutting other programs that they need to make ends meet.
Right. You want to create a new program that keeps people in the exact same place.
Right.
It's one of those things that, I have friends who say, well, those minimum wage workers, they get, school lunch programs and LIHEAP and all of these other programs that they have to go and beg for. So, if we raise it to $10 an hour, they won't get that. No, all you're going to do is you're going to make their lives the same by raising it to $9 or $10 an hour. There needs to be a raise in the minimum wage that actually makes people's lives better, not just the same, only shifting around how they make ends meet.
Exactly. And it's how these things work together: increased wages, a robust safety net that actually catches people when they fall or they're unable to work. And really, our nation is the richest in the world. We have enough money. We shouldn't necessarily be focused on balancing the budget when we really need to invest in people and invest in our economy that's currently struggling. And we certainly don't need to pick one program out over the other, right? Like, we should make sure that there is a robust child allowance and that there's robust funding for other social service benefits. And this is an issue of political will more so than anything else. And I don't think we need to be focusing on balancing the budget on the backs of children at this point that live in poverty.
No, I'm right there with you. But what do you say, Alex, to the person who says, by giving out this money to people with kids, you're just going to encourage people to be irresponsible and have more kids? Because we hear this a lot. It's usually racially charged, but it's something that's always out there. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say that first, sort of looking at Romney's plan in particular, there is a cap on the number of children that would benefit from it. So there's that. But I would say, from a broader perspective, it's my point of view that it's not necessarily the government's job to weigh into people's personal decisions around family, the choices they make on having children. We don't need to be taking a regressive approach that actually generates more inequality for people based on the decisions they're making around their family and whether or not they're going to have additional children. It's really making sure there's a floor for everyone. We just should not be the richest nation in the world and have some of the highest poverty rates of among other wealthy nations. It's just unacceptable.
No, I'm right there with you. Because look, I talk about this all the time. I was one of those kids. And it was because of a number of social programs that I was able to make it through childhood, to get a good public education, and then was able to get a good union job to where now I've paid back in multiples the amount of and this is the message here. I've paid back in multiples the amount of help that I was given, and I think that's what we should be striving for. We want people to do better so that they can reach a hand back and help up.
Absolutely. And I mean, even if you look at there's a wonky stat around how there's a return on investment with ensuring that families have at least an additional $3,000 extra a month. I think the stat was something like 17% or 19% increase in earnings in adulthood for children whose families get that additional $3,000. So we have the data to sort of even back up what you're saying, right? That making sure children have what they need and as they grow up really pays off in dividends in adulthood and contributions to this country and just, being able to have their healthiest, make the best choices in their lives.
Now, I do find it interesting that Mitt Romney has this plan. I don't know how many Republicans are probably going to sign on to something like this, even though, as I said from the beginning, this was a kind of a conservative idea because, people with kids spend a lot of money. I know I've got 3 kids. It's expensive. And it's good for the economy. We need consumers. What do you think the chances of getting something like this passed through? Now I'm hoping the budget reconciliation, we get the $1.9 trillion bill move through and we start getting money into state and local governments and into the communities. But what do you think a long-term sustainable program of something like Romney's plan or hopefully something better? What do you think the chances of that actually happening are?
That's a good question. I mean, obviously this likely, the American Rescue Plan that's inclusive of the child tax credit expansion will likely see that pass. But again, to your point, it is temporary. I think with Romney's plan, there's a place here for some continued conversation and negotiation, right? Because there's actually some political will to make these child tax credit expansions permanent, but how we do it is still up for discussion. And I think that, for Democrats in particular, they sort of see this as an open door for conversation, how we might go about making this permanent, being able to pay for it. And I would say that there are likely other Republicans who care about, and even more, I guess you could say conservative Democrats who care about child poverty, who care about the issues around homelessness that we're facing. They come to this issue from different perspectives and different policy areas of focus. But I would say that there's still room for negotiation on how we get this done, and that there is some will to get this done permanently.
No, we got a lot of work to do, and again, it comes back down to our representatives. It comes back down ultimately to the Senate. If we can't get the Senate to move forward on this, and we can't get them to actually do their job, we're probably pretty well stalled, right?
That's right.
Sad stuff. But Alex, I appreciate the time, the thoughts, the work that you guys do there over at the Center for American Progress. Keep it up, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thank you so much, Rick. Take care.
Good stuff. I appreciate the time. Alex Cawthorne Gaines, Vice President of the Poverty to Prosperity Project there at the Center for American Progress. We'll get links out on how you can check out their work. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
A union of over 1.4 million strong and growing, AFSCME is gaining improvements in the workplace all across America. And right here in the Commonwealth, more than 95,000 AFSCME members make Pennsylvania happen. Highways, libraries, hospitals, parks, offices, prisons, classrooms, museums, courtrooms. You'll find AFSCME members at work in all these places and many more.
I make Pennsylvania happen every day.
I make Pennsylvania happen every day.
Today's AFSCME members take on public service jobs as diverse as they are, not for the recognition, but for a better Pennsylvania. For more information, please visit our website at AFSCME13.org. Labor is changing, so is your labor union. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said at the beginning, I'm really happy with some of Joe Biden's choices to fill regulatory positions, to fill secretary spots. Thrilled with Marty Walsh at the Department of Labor. Happy with the person that he's put into education, and this guy that they've nominated and moved through the committee to be the head of the EPA, I think is really exciting. His name's Michael Regan. He was, he's recently the Secretary of North Carolina's Department of Environmental Quality. He'd worked at EPA for a whole long time. But his statement during his testimony before the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, he said, "We will restore the role of science and transparency to EPA. We will support the dedicated and talented career officials. We will move with a sense of urgency on climate change, and we will stand up for environmental justice and equity. And we will do that in a collaborative manner in partnership with state and local government." I like that because it's a huge departure from the last guy who was like, hey, let's see what we can pollute. And let's see how we can then bury it. So for me, accountability, transparency, and people who actually, heaven forbid, actually believe in government that can actually do something. Exciting times. And here to share some thoughts on, the prospect of Michael Regan being confirmed. He got through the House Senate committee. Lindsey Graham actually voted for him. So I think there's a good chance. I've asked Gary Morton to come back and talk with us. Gary's the president of AFGE Council 238, the American Federation of Government Employees. Gary, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick. It's a pleasure to be back. I thank you for giving me the opportunity. Also, before we get started, I want to say my heart and prayers goes out to the folks in Texas and out in the Midwest, anyone suffering under the pandemic and also the storm. We're praying for them, and country's going to come together to help them. Getting back to the EPA, I was very excited to hear that. It's one thing to hear it. I can say under the last 4 years, the Trump administration had made no bones about assaulting the EPA, getting rid of the employees, regulatory rollbacks. So it's finally good to hear somebody talk about letting the employees do the job that they were hired to do, protect human health and the environment for the American people.
No, I mean, across the agencies, I'm going, we can get the patronage hires out and we can bring in people who actually believe in doing their job. So the question I have for you, and we've had these conversations over the last couple of years as people have fled for other industries, the work environment toxic. Do you see people coming back to the EPA now that you have leadership who's going to want their input and value their experience?
I'm hoping so. The proof will be in the pudding because it has to happen. We can't undergo another 4 years of regulatory rollbacks, assaults against the employees. That's one of the reasons why some of the people left, and just the inability to do their jobs. So we need to restore, renew, and revive. And how we do that is first of all, working with Congress and the unions to make sure that we don't have to go through what we did, we being the American public, first of all, and also the EPA employees. And all federal employees were assaulted by the executive order. So hopefully they can restore faith that they want us to protect the environment and protect human health. Because this last administration did everything it could to crush the employees of the EPA.
No, and since you brought that up, one of the first things that Joe Biden did as president was to roll back those executive orders that Trump had placed to target your union specifically, the American Federation of Government Employees, which, I've been saying, Joe Biden to this point, and he hasn't even been president a month, has been the most pro-worker president of my lifetime.
Amen. I'm very thankful to hear that. And it's such a breath of fresh air because we were on a defensive. We had our shields up. It's like Spartans, just arrows coming every day, attack. What did they say? Drain the swamp. Yet they filled them with political appointees who did not desire to protect human health and the environment. They removed climate change, couldn't mention it, anything dealing with science. So that's why we have to change the culture at EPA, not only to use science for what it's worth and how it should be used, but also to respect the employees and what they bring to the table.
Now, you brought up climate change. I look at what's happening in Texas right now, the fact that, we've got one of the largest states in our country with millions of people without power. We've had a number of people who have died because of it. We can't drink the water now without it being boiled. We're in this moment where the energy producing state is crippled, and I would argue it's a bunch of reasons. Part of it is our defiance to do anything about climate change, and also the fact that reality is what it is. We've given over the industries, our utilities, to private interests, moneyed interests, and it's all about the money at the end of the day.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, and I feel embarrassed because I really didn't see it as strong until the Trump administration came in. There was always some type of balance between economics, science, human health, politics, but that all went out the window the last 4 years. And when you purposely enforce rules and change laws that don't protect the human health and the environment, don't allow the employees to protect the human health and the environment, and yet you have, don't want to get political, but you have a condoning of these activities by a number of leaders. What does that say of what they think about the people?
No, you're absolutely right. And I want to get back to the EPA for a second because that's where your expertise is. A lot of the reports that we're reading coming out right now are, we don't know how bad things are. As the reporting has come out, we've had nothing but lobbyists and corporate people in charge of EPA decisions for these last 4 years. And as you know, as a guest told me one time, think about what we know, think about what we can prove, and then think of all the things we don't know. And they're saying the EPA is going to be one of these places that's going to be digging out from the last 4 years probably for decades. Do you agree with that assessment?
Totally. Because when I joined the agency and I left the Internal Revenue Service, I came to work for an agency that protected human health and the environment, that did its charge, but also had the mandate from the people. And over the past 4 years, we've been made to be scapegoats. They took away our staffing. It's very important that we get the staffing back. Also, a fair workplace environment for the employees. We have to restore trust, receive trust from the EPA leadership so that they trust the employees and the employees also trust the leadership. Because, I mean, you put a mouse in charge of the cheese, and his sole purpose was to gut the agency, roll back the regulations, create morale issues, buy out. They dropped us from 18,000 to a little bit over 12,000. So we need staffing. We need renewal of the purpose of EPA by Congress. The funding and the staffing is very important.
No, and this is one of those moments, Gary, where I'm someone who believes that I don't want to return to the days of patronage. And I was talking about this all during the Trump years, that Trump wanted absolute loyalists to him and to his ideology, and filled every agency he could with corporate stooges, in my view. I want to go back to a point where we get educated people who dedicate their careers and their lives to doing a task, and they don't care who's in the White House. Their task is what it is. I want boring bureaucrats to do the oversight of keeping our environment healthy and safe, keeping our air and our water safe to drink and breathe, keeping our workplaces safe. I want boring bureaucrats. I don't want to have these political fights over who's going to make sure that name the regulation. It just seems like I want to go back to some bit of sanity. And I'm hoping Joe Biden's this guy. And to this point, we're only a month in. I'm happy with what he's done.
Well, I'm pleased with what we're hearing. The union, we have been fighting, and thank you for giving us an opportunity to restore the EPA back. Also, to fight for the people's rights, fight for the employees' rights. So I'm hoping that the sanity can come in. We want to work collaboratively, we being AFGE, representing the employees. And some of these employees are the same people that you're in the supermarket with. They play on your son's team or with your daughter's ballet. So we all want America to have a stake in this and all do it together. So you got to get rid of the political employees. And if I might say, it was a civil war there because the fear and intimidation on the career employees played a great part in the last 4 years.
Well, walk me through some of that, because I think over the next couple of years, we're going to find out just how bad things were as we start pulling back the curtain and examining how hostile the work environment is, because I've heard this story from a number of people. In fact, I've invited a number of your members to come on this program and share their experiences, and they were all terrified to do it because they didn't want the target on their back. They didn't want the administration coming after them, but they were sending me, hey, this is what's going on. And so, how bad was it?
It was very bad. And the thing about it, a lot of things happened before you even knew it. One of the for lack of a better term, slick ways is to remove the checks and balances. So you have decisions made in a vacuum. When I first started at EPA, you had the program, which I worked in. We did the inspections. We recommended charges. We also had the upper management, but you had concurrence by the attorneys on the job. And during this administration, they were removed from the concurrence. So they no longer had the ability to sign off on and approve penalties, consent orders. They could only be consulted. And Rick, when you're consulted, I consult you, but I do what I want to do. It's nice if you agree with me, but there was no authority. The checks and balances have to be put back in. And when you put political pressure, all of a sudden you have program employees of a GS 9, 11 nature talking about penalties in front of the RAs. There were so many layers of management put in where everyone was watching their back. So many more meetings. They stopped us from doing the job by just filling us with administrative functions.
So I love that consulted angle, because when someone says you're being consulted, you're just being told this is how it is, like it or not, and be glad that we told you. So I guess last line of questioning in this, because you're obviously the guy there, you know what's going on the ground. How bad? Again, I go back to how bad was it? How much worse off are we? I know you guys do a lot of inspections. How much did that go down? How much more? I guess the simple question is, how much more polluted are we as a nation?
Well, Rick, I retired in November of 2019. So although I'm still president, I'm in the fight, I'm not in the office. I can say, based on the regulatory rollbacks, AFGE in our issue papers, we showed enforcement going down over 20% just in the first 2 years of the Trump administration. Criminal enforcement's dropping. Any type of regulatory enforcement was decreased or written away. When I first started, I was in underground storage tank department, and they had to split up our group because we were only allowed to put 75% of our time into the underground storage tanks. So we have to get a mandate from Congress and also from up above. And that's where Mr. Regan comes in. He has to enforce the regulations, give us a mandate, us being the employees, to do what they have to do to protect the employees, protect human health and the environment, not to protect the environment, not to hear from the lobbyists, not to cater to big business. Got to get back to basics of government for the people.
Yeah. Do you have confidence in this guy? Do you know much about him?
No, I'm hearing all the good things, and I'm going to pray. And before I say anything like negative or whatever, we're going to give these people an opportunity, and we owe them that. They fought up against a mighty storm, and they won the election by stating they wanted to go back to government. So we have to give them a time. They're not in place yet, but all the signs are yes, because we suffered. Our employees, we were under a unilateral imposition of a contract. And hopefully we can get steps to just create a better workplace for not only EPA, but all federal employees.
No, I'm right there with you, and go back to boring old government and heaven forbid people who actually believe in what they do. I said earlier, you had, Rick Perry, who, George Bush put in charge of the Department of Energy, and that was one of the agencies he wanted to destroy. So the fact that he was you can't make this stuff up. So for me, having people who believe in the charge that they're given and the work that they're doing, I think is a major step forward.
Yes, it is. And already, we can say happy days are here again because a cloud is over the agency. It's like a truce was declared because of the fear that came down from the top onto the employees. We say ding dong, the witch is dead. So, we just are very happy to have a better environment. But now it's up to this administration to restore the EPA.
Yeah, I've got good hope for this guy. I looked at his record. Young guy, seems to be fairly ambitious. Seems to get it. I've got great hope for him.
I do too, and I haven't heard any anything negative. And as I stated in the beginning of the interview, when you have the people on top backing you, wanting to do the mission of the agency, wanting to restore the faith and transparency, wanting to create working conditions that are good for the employees, we have no place to go but up, because the last 4 years we were under a hammer.
There you go. Gary, I appreciate the time. Great talking to you with my friend.
Anytime, Rick. God bless you, and thank you so much.
You as well. Our good friend Gary Morton, president of AFGE Council 238. I'm like him. I'm happy to see it. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. A current question is which workers are entitled to union representation, who really gets counted as a worker, and who decides wages, hours, and conditions. These were the questions that divided the campus of Yale University. On this day in labor history, the year was 1992. The Graduate Employee Student Organization on campus began a 3-day strike. They were supported by Locals 34 and 35, part of the Hotel and Restaurant Employees International Union, who represented the clerical workers, dining service staff, and technical and maintenance workers at Yale University, as well as the dietary workers at Yale New Haven Hospital. These workers stood in solidarity with the graduate employees and walked out in a show of support. They recognized the important work the graduate employees did for the university, including teaching classes and grading papers. Yet, Yale administrators argued the graduate employees' primary role was that of the student, and they were therefore not entitled to union representation. The year before, the graduate students had held a 1-day strike, but did not gain union recognition. As a result of the 1992 strike, some graduate students received improved funding. They also received inclusion on the Yale Executive Committee, an administrative body. Yet, they were again denied the right to be in a union. Another strike 3 years later had the same result. Today, there are 31 recognized graduate student unions in the United States. There are 18 that remain unrecognized. One of these is at Yale University. Today, universities more and more seek to cut costs by having graduate students and adjuncts teach courses. These workers are paid far less than tenured professors, and they are increasingly turning to the idea of unionization. The question remains, will they be recognized as real workers, and will they have a say in their wages, hours, and conditions? Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back.
Grassroots progressives put Biden in the White House. But what do we get for that? Nothing guaranteed, but at least he gives us the possibility of winning some progressive policies. Unlike when Clinton and Obama fleetingly raised hopes in 1992 and 2008 that progress was possible, only to disappoint us, 2 new factors give progressive proposals a greater chance this time. First is Biden himself. A core part of his political makeup is that he's Joe Labor, coming to the job with a genuine affinity for working stiffs. For Biden, labor rights are not wonkish issues, but about showing gut-level respect for working families, actually caring about the well-being of workers. Second, and most important, is you and me. This is not 92 or 08, when our incoming president simply said thank you and goodbye to grassroots backers, then handed the government's economic keys to Wall Street bankers and corporate lobbyists. We won't allow Biden to do that, and he knows it. Today, there's an organized, battle-tested left on alert in practically every congressional district. Plus, we now have a growing cadre of unwilting agitators who are influential members of Congress, willing to expose and oppose insider sellouts. This time, progressive forces are not about to be shushed or shooed away by the Democratic Party's go-slow establishment. We're akin to the insistent forces of fundamental change who asserted themselves after Roosevelt won. FDR had not run as a New Dealer, but as a centrist Democrat promising little more than to rid the White House of the clueless Herbert Hoover. But the moment he was elected, grassroots movements were in his face. They created the historic New Deal reform agenda and then made Roosevelt spend political capital to pass it. This is Jim Hightower saying, like the New Dealers, we should push hard and fast for the big change America needs.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So one of the things we haven't heard an awful lot about when talking about what happened on January 6th is, well, the education level of the people who were running through our Capitol and smashing and defecating on the floor and urinating on desks. And I saw this really great piece over at the website badassteacher.org, and it was one of these things that it made me start go, yeah, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about, what the historical context of these. I just thought these people were criminals. But, the greatest line that I think I've read recently is, who needs civics when all it takes is a flag cape to announce your devout patriotism? I'm like, that is incredible. That's why I've asked the author of Revolutions in the Capitol and Classroom by Christine Vaccaro. Christine, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, thank you so much for having me.
I got to tell you, that is by far the best. I think that encompasses the entire thing for me. Who needs to know anything about anything when all you have to do is wave your flag and scream really loud?
we certainly saw that. Thank you. It's funny to me that we're here in February and it's Black History Month and it's being celebrated in schools, and the fact that Black history is still this accepted appendix to the regularly scheduled curriculum really tells us everything we need to know about what happened that day.
Yeah. So the question becomes, and I've heard this argument, and look, I don't know where to even begin on how you straighten things out, how you undo things without breaking things. Mm-hmm. So what is the path forward? Because, I know people who want to do the right thing, who want, history to be taught as it was and not the idealized version that many of us were given. But also don't want to be the victims of what they believe is going to be coming, which is them becoming the oppressed. So how do you begin that?
Well, I mean, looking at sort of even just the 1619 project and the backlash that has faced, you're taking voices that have been silenced and stories that have been silenced, and schools that would want to go forward with trying to teach that are facing the threat of federal funding being taken away, and you have parents who are expressing concern about all these kinds of things, and I think just like everything else, it's something that we have to kind of work through step by step. That's a great start, is just the fact that that's even in the conversation right now.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk to my kids, and back in 2015, we did a civil rights tour with the program where we went across the southern U.S., in search of laborers' involvement in the civil rights movement. And what I found very quickly is, the civil rights movement is now a tourism industry. So all of those places that did really horrible things to Black people now have an industry around profiting off of it, which I find very interesting. But it did give us an opportunity to talk about the history of slavery and the history of Black people in this country that, I don't think the kids got in school. And I don't think that's a bad thing to teach that history.
No, not at all. And that's incredibly ironic. I think what we have to really reckon with is the fact that, and actually this was kind of an epiphany I had from one of my students, as I often get, who said the day after the Capitol riot, Miss, I'm tired of living through historical events. And the ninth grade kid. And I was so blown away by that, because that is actually what our students are doing every single day. They're watching all of these things happen. They're living through a pandemic. They're living through uprisings. They're attended. I mean, I have students who have attended. Last summer they were, last summer. Sorry to even remember. Black Lives Matter marches and protests and everything like that, and they're living through it. And I think by starting to think about how can we teach history from the present and working backwards, like here's where we are, how did we get here, and starting from there and sort of honoring the fact that they're actually living through the history, is a place that we could really begin. And also, we're at a moment where, because of COVID and because of the sort of opportunity that gives us in education, to say, okay, well, we have a chance to do everything different right now. Why not now to begin to start to think about how we can take these chances?
No, and in that frame, because now I'm starting to think back, to when I was a kid, those moments, that the history that I lived through. I think back to, Operation Eagle Claw, when the helicopters crashed when we were trying to go free the hostages in the Iran crisis back in '79. I think of Regan being shot. I think of the Challenger exploding. I think of those moments, but I wasn't inundated with it every moment of the day like we are now. That was the front page of the newspaper, and it then went on to we got past it. I think about, as you've said, the kids are living through this history every day, and then being inundated with it, with social media and everything that comes along with it.
Yeah, it's so visceral for them, and that's really a true point. I mean, the social media piece of it, they can't get away from it. We know that what's happening right now with COVID and all of that is obviously taking a tremendous social emotional toll on kids, and traumas that are being inflicted just from that piece alone. So, and we talk and give lip service to the idea of social emotional education, and that's kind of like, okay, let's take a mindfulness break, kids, and back to what we're doing. But to kind of just ignore the fact that, and just not even really get into or talk about the stuff that's actually happening, is in and of itself a trauma, because it's, basically ignoring their reality. So really getting into it and honoring what their experience is day to day, that would actually be true social emotional learning, in addition to a more accurate and authentic historical program.
Now, it's interesting to me, though. You write in the piece another fabulous line that I think is important. You say fake news didn't start on cable news. It really began with history books. And, I agree with that, because, most, all of the history books are someone's interpretation of what happens. How do we get to the point to where it's no longer, that interpretation? How do we decide, I guess, is the question, what is the quote unquote right history? Because too much of what we're reading now seems to come out of Texas, and the people who are on those boards who decide what's in the Texas textbooks. The rest of us get rammed down our throat, like, somehow Phyllis Schlafly is worthy of being included in our history, but some of the founders are not.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think really it comes down to sources and primary sources, and what are actual stories of people who actually live through things, and getting to the most authentic truth as possible from that. Because otherwise, anytime it's not that, it is an interpretation. It could be a very accurate interpretation, but it's still an interpretation. So, finding the voices and the first person accounts and the truth from people who actually lived through these experiences, I think also, again, going back to kind of connecting it back to a more social emotional piece, that it brings it alive. It would not only make it more truthful, but it would also kind of foster the ability to talk about, empathetic reactions and putting oneself in another person's shoes, et cetera.
Yeah, that seems like an awful lot of work. That seems like an awful lot of context, because history isn't as straightforward and simple facts like math would be. And I'll tell you, I was learned history. Or I was learned. I learned history I didn't learn English, but I learned me some history. No, but I learned history, in a very grill and drill kind of way. This happened this date, and it was that kind of segmented thing. It wasn't until I got to college and got older that I started putting things in with much more context and looking at all of these different angles of things that I don't know you can do in a grade school or in a high school setting. Or am I wrong?
I mean, I think anything's possible, and I think that we have to try to do something a little bit more comprehensive, complex, and nuanced, because this isn't working. I mean, we're seeing this. I think that there's certainly teachers who already do this type of work and are already weaving it through what might be, normative curriculum. I mean, I know, for instance, in New York State, we have 2 history state exams that are given as part of the high school curriculum. And I have taught both of those courses, and I know that there is, it's a very sort of scripted curriculum that happens. And last year they canceled the Regents. They're called the Regents exams. This year they may cancel them as well. I don't see how they can't. And that goes to now speaking about, okay, this curriculum has been developed to go towards a standardized test. And here we've had almost a year of no standardized tests. Nobody has died. And do we need to still be using this as the driving force of what gets taught in a curriculum? Or can we say to somebody who's a history teacher and an expert and ostensibly passionate about their subject, get that input into what should be in a history curriculum and what voices should be the ones that we amplify?
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because I can hear all of my friends, especially people that are my age, going, so basically what you're saying, Christine, is everything that I learned about history is wrong.
No, I don't think that. I think that there's truth in everything. Like they always say, there's 2 sides to every story, and then there's the truth. But I think it's a matter of perspective and framing. And what we've learned in history has been from the perspective and the frame of the winner, of the person who is the dominant party in the power dynamic. And instead, if we were able to kind of shift, or at the very least share the lens with the people who were on the other side of that dynamic, the people whose voices have been marginalized because they weren't the winners, then we would get a more dimensional narrative. I mean, we don't have to say, there's good stuff the founding fathers did, but when we kind of allow for a very one-dimensional portrait of what they are and who they were, we're robbing ourselves of a more authentic experience in history, and as to be frank, like just being an American in general, because then we're allowed to sort of live this unexamined life of what it means to be an American and what are all these things, and they're complex, and they're not.
And that's an excellent point to bring up, because it is complex. Because, I know people right now who are saying, basically we need to cancel all of the things that we were taught about the founders, and instead of them being great people with vision and all that stuff put up on this high pedestal that we were as kids led to believe, now they're all garbage because they were slave owners and we have no use for them now.
Right. And I think that to say that is also dangerous, because that would also be taking away what there were true contributions. I mean, but if we can understand what those contributions were through the lens of all of that nuance, then we get a deeper understanding of the origins of our country and what they actually contributed to.
No, so I guess the other question I have with this then, because I've got thousands now, is, are we capable of this? Because, I've had conversations with people who they cannot possibly understand that things were any different than they are right now, that people's thinking was any different, that, the times would be different, and that they can't contextualize what life was like as a founding father, and that the only way this country became a country were through some of the compromises that were made. And we may look back on them and go, they were horrible, should have never happened. But to be honest, it was the only way we were getting together.
I mean, I think we could say that about even modern politics, right? I mean, there's the context of the present moment is important in the sense that it kind of creates the frame, right? But in reality, if we're looking at them just from the perspective of they did they get away with this because this is what was really acceptable at that time, or something like that, or this is a compromise that had to be made in order for this to go on. Like we can't give a pass. They may not be able to get a moral pass, or maybe they do. But the point is that again, we're sort of understanding it in a larger frame.
Right, because I'll be honest, when I learned history and I learned about the founders, when I got to high school, they were very clear that the founders were flawed in their thinking. They were very flawed that they allowed the original sin of our Constitution to be in there. But I learned it as it was the only way the Constitution was going to get through, and that they knew down the road this was going to have to be addressed, which is why they allowed them. And there was a whole bunch back then that I don't know that we teach anymore.
Well, I think, again, like this is sort of why I think it's an interesting thing, an idea to play with, to think about teaching history in reverse to some extent, right? Because if you start with what the manifestations of those compromises became, then those compromises maybe don't seem so much as a way to get through what we needed to get through in order to get ahead, but sort of like, okay, there was a price that we paid for this, and here's now we're living it.
Right. No, I agree with that. I try as a parent to teach my kids a wide lens, cast a wide net. I think our education system needs to do much more of that, to teach all different perspectives and get away from this is the date and this is that, and actually think about analyzing history more than just regurgitating it.
Definitely. And I think what I, as a teacher, I mean, I'm an English teacher, but I've done a lot of, I've had, been very lucky to have been able to do a lot of cross-disciplinary work. And I think that's even, again, and I'm kind of getting more into the wonky curriculum stuff of education, but, when you start to think about why is it in its own silo, like why aren't we sort of looking at it, why can't we work with, English and social studies departments working together and saying, okay, well, let's do character analysis, like as if this was sort of somebody in a book, and like let's look at a character in this way, and kind of applying different ways to do it. And you can still learn the facts and the dates and all the important information, but if you're getting a more holistic understanding of what occurred, it not only makes it more accurate, it makes it more present and more part of what our day-to-day life is.
Yeah, I mean, again, sadly, and the last thought I have on this is, sadly, I don't want to make this a situation of winners and losers. I think we can all get a better understanding of what our history was without turning yesterday's oppressed into today's oppressors. And I think that's what a lot of people are concerned with changing what generations of people have learned through their history. And I want accurate history, but I'm seeing that more and more.
I mean, people are terrified of change, right? I mean, that's partly what undergirded the entire MAGA movement, and so yeah, I can see that point.
Yeah. But as you pointed out, I mean, these aren't people who learned history anyway. They saw no historical significance to carrying the Confederate flag through the United States Capitol.
It's remarkable. It's remarkable. And the fact that the Capitol itself was, rebuilt by slaves. I mean, it's it was so glaring. It was so glaring.
No, you're right. And one of the things that you did point out in the article that I actually clicked on the link to go watch the video. I was amazed at how many people stayed between the velvet ropes.
I know. I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was so funny to me in a very sick way that they were sort of that's the programming of kind of following these rules as they were about to do this incredibly grotesque deed. It's just insanity.
It's crazy stuff. Again, the article, Revolutions in the Capitol and Classroom, written by Christine Vaccaro. We'll get links out on how you can take a look at that. Good stuff. Christine, I appreciate you taking time for us. Always good talking with you.
Thank you, Rick, so much for having me. Take care.
You as well. And again, I highly suggest taking a look at it. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. That was the day more rubber workers sat down in Akron, Ohio. Tire builders in Goodyear's plant number 2, Department 251A, sat down when 700 co-workers were laid off. Goodyear had been running 4 6-hour shifts. They hoped to reduce the workforce by implementing 3 8-hour shifts with no increase in pay. Management moved quickly to fire all of the strikers. By this day, all 4,000 workers at Goodyear voted to strike over the layoffs and firings, the speed-ups, and the new shift hours and pay. The enormous 11-mile facility was immediately shut down. In his book, Strike, historian Jeremy Breacher indicates that few, if any, were union members. The United Rubber Workers Union was hesitant to associate itself with the sit-down. Rubber workers organized themselves. They set up 24-hour pickets at dozens of gates, built striker shanties, and set their demands. After 6 days, the United Rubber Workers Union sanctioned the strike. Breacher described the scene writing, quote, "The company secured an injunction against mass picketing. 10,000 tradespeople from across the city gathered with lead pipe and baseball bats to stop 150 sheriff's deputies from opening the plants. The Summit County Central Labor Council guaranteed a general strike if Law and Order League vigilantes carried out their threatened March 18th attack on picket lines. The vigilante movement was paralyzed. Federal mediators demanded a return to work and arbitration. Workers responded, no, 1,000 times no. I'd rather die than say yes. Finally, Goodyear capitulated on most of the demands, except formal recognition of the union. Rubber workers returned to work largely victorious. After renewed struggles, workers finally won union recognition a year later.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to clean up something that and thanks, Max, for pointing out that I evidently misspoke. I'm told that I said that Rick Perry was Secretary of Energy under George W. Bush. That is incorrect. Perry was actually governor of Texas during that time period. Perry was Trump's energy secretary. My mistake. I screwed that up. Make sure I got that straightened out. He was Trump's energy secretary, and did a really not good job. So just wanted to make sure that was cleaned up. And Max, thanks for straightening that out. Now here's what's interesting to me. I was paying attention to some of the headlines on the on what's going on in Texas, and the fact that the LA Times had the greatest line. It was amid severe weather and power crisis, Texas legislators stopped talking about secession. And I said this yesterday. Where are all those people who are saying, we're leaving, we're taking our energy and we're going? Quiet, oddly quiet. And, understand, Texas is supposed to be the place that we get all of our energy from. If they can't figure out how to do this in a way that where all the energy is to where all of their people get taken care of, the rest of us have a problem. And this is another example of how insufficient our energy grid really is. You may remember it's been years, I think about 10 or 15 years now, since Ohio, parts of New York, parts of Pennsylvania were shut down for weeks because the power grid took a dump. We should be investing to make sure that never happens ever again, and that during these storms we have redundancy to make sure that there's backups to help people. Not to have politicians like the mayor of Colorado, Texas, saying you're on your own, buddy. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Too bad if you don't have boots. But at least the secession talk has stopped. I guess there is, if there's something good, that's it. My other favorite story of the day, and I talked about this yesterday a minute, and I love the fact that this rich guy is all hurt. He's all upset by the fact that he got taken. He got taken to the cleaners. He evidently decided that it was a good idea to give Donald Trump $2 million. $2 million to go after and the steal. Because we're going to stop the steal. This organization that claimed that they were going to pursue all of the angles, all of the court documents. They were going to get them. But Fred Eshelman gave them $2 million. They asked for $200,000. He gave them $2 million. They didn't do anything. Nothing. Now he wants his money back, and he's suing. And as I said yesterday, what I want to see is I want to see this guy burn the house down. Because this is what it's going to be. It's going to be a burn the house down scenario where this guy is going to open up the graft that is the grift that is all of this stuff, the thievery and just the scheme that is what the Republicans get away with, and Democrats too. At some point, the money that goes into these political schemes has got to be exposed. And as I said, I wanted Jamie Raskin and the Democrats to go after who funded all of those people to get to the Capitol, who funded all of the messaging, who funded all of the groups that kept all this propaganda going. Who are these people that have put all of this money into these right-wing groups? This is what I think you have to come out with. And I think Eshelman, beginning this suit, I love Discovery. I think he's probably going to get his money back, but I would love them to go through Discovery and have that become somewhat public so that we know who these groups are and we know the people who are funding them. This dark money stuff, got to stop. It's the only way we save our politics. Anyway, got to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
A once-in-a-generation winter storm is hammering parts of the South, and it is affecting states that aren't equipped to handle the record low temperatures or the snow or the ice.
Historic storm cripples Texas, knocks out power to millions, brings record low temperatures to dozens of states. That said, U.S. winters aren't as cold as they used to be. Plus,
last night I was on the phone for 2 straight hours with Xi Jinping.
Biden warns China is outpacing the U.S. on infrastructure.
All of those warnings and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
If we don't get moving, they're going to eat our lunch.
Sounds delicious. What are we serving?
Crow.
This is your Green News Report. Well, okay, Desi Doyen, this winter storm is packing a wallop across, most of the United States.
Yes. As we go to air, more than 150 million Americans in 25 states are under winter storm warnings and advisories as a truly historic storm spreads heavy snow and significant ice from the southern plains of Texas all the way up to the northeast. The National Weather Service called the hazardous weather, quote, unprecedented and expansive. Texas is ground zero for this storm, record-breaking for the state in its scope and intensity. For the first time, all 254 counties in Texas are under winter storm advisories. It's an extremely serious situation for nearly 4 million customers who lost power amid the record cold temperatures on Monday as widespread ice and snow paralyzed the state.
Well, so much for global warming. I'm just putting my audition reel together for Fox News. I hear they're hiring.
The power outages and rolling blackouts are caused by complex factors, but in short, they were caused by a record high demand at the same time as the extreme cold knocked out power lines, froze natural gas pipelines and some wind turbines not hardened for low temperatures, and caused natural gas and coal power plants to trip offline. The Texas grid operator was forced to prioritize natural gas supplies for heating and away from electricity generation. Overall, about a third of Texas capacity was knocked offline. That's about 15 Hoover Dams worth of power plant capacity. Grid failures in this storm show that the existing fossil fuel-based system cannot handle these conditions. It will take time for scientists to determine the influence of man-made climate change on this particular extreme storm, but it is in line with projections that global warming is making such storms even more intense and frequent.
So global warming is making everything colder.
No, global warming is making everything hotter and more extreme. A growing body of research has found that melting of sea ice in the Arctic is disrupting the jet stream that drives weather systems across the U.S., allowing ultra-cold Arctic air to blast all the way down to the Gulf Coast. Yet, on the same day that Texas froze, Miami, Florida, on Monday hit a record heat index of 92.
Of course it did. And actually, around the entire globe, it's much warmer than normal. It's just freezing cold in those 25 U.S. states.
And new data from Climate Central shows cold winter temperatures are not as cold as they used to be. In the U.S., winter is the fastest warming season, and the coldest temperatures across the nation have trended upward over the past 50 years. In Dallas, for example, the lowest temperature reached every year has increased by nearly 8 degrees Fahrenheit since 1970. President Biden approved emergency declaration requests for federal disaster aid from Texas and other states, even though they didn't vote for him. Meteorologists in the insurance industry warned that this extreme weather event, once it's over, will likely cost the U.S. well over $1 billion, making this storm probably the first billion-dollar disaster of 2021.
Unfortunately, it probably won't be the last.
The power outages are spreading to other states in the path of the storm as well. These systems were simply not designed for 21st century climate extremes, and our aging infrastructure system simply can't handle it. Late last week, in a meeting with a bipartisan group of senators, President Biden warned of the critical need to invest in repairing and upgrading the aging U.S. electric grid and other infrastructure, not just for resilience, but also for economic competitiveness. He warned China is aggressively outpacing the United States on infrastructure building, investing more in clean energy deployment and high-speed rail than the United States.
If we don't get moving, they're going to eat our lunch. They have major new initiatives on rail, and they're investing billions of dollars in dealing with a whole range of issues that relate to transportation, the environment.
China, as usual, is playing the long game. The U.S., as usual, is playing catch-up. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. We are now celebrating our 12th anniversary of the Green News Report, and we thank you for your support at bradblog.com/donate. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So while I'm talking about adding construction jobs to rebuild our economy, rebuild our infrastructure, move us to the 21st century of broadband access and airports and waterways and all that stuff, because we need job creation. Turns out one of the big job creators during the COVID outbreak was actually legal pot. Yep. New report out from industry analysts Leafly and the Whitney Economics Group show that added about 77,000 new jobs in 2020. Right now, the legal pot industry has somewhere around 320,000 employees, had a 32% increase over the last year. I guess, I personally didn't realize that many people smoke pot, but hey, or ate it or do whatever they do. It is what it is. But 77,000 new jobs in 2020 in the pot industry. And look, if Pennsylvania goes that way, maybe we'll start growing it here as well. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
So what do you think? More pot jobs?
Well, that report was released at 4:20 today.
I got it.
I see what? That. What? Yeah. Okay. That's the old California in the 70s. They smoked pot at 4:20. Former Speaker John Boehner is a lobbyist. I can't remember exactly the group. He's a lobbyist for some pot group.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
He is, and so is
from Merlot to pot.
Yeah, I think he is, and Catherine Sebelius is too.
Yes. Well, it's a large industry, and I know somebody that really made substantial money. This is fascinating. Now, my mind doesn't work like this, but she invested in companies that made these lights because lights are used to grow the pot.
Right, the grow lights.
Right, and she found whatever the company was and bought the stock when this all started a few years ago and made some significant money on it. I wouldn't even think that. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought that way. So
now, here's the other funny part. As a Teamster, our union actually represents pot growers.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And I always question, did they get, like in Germany, the I guess the UPS workers in Germany get like a liter of beer every day as part of their union contract, or they used to. I often wondered if, part of the pot contract is they get some of the stuff to take home with them.
Yeah, as long as they don't smoke and drive, My son-in-law is a Teamster, so.
Yeah, just don't smoke and drive.
There you go.
The other story of the day, Rush Limbaugh dead, age 70. Thoughts?
Yeah, Rush, I was at a very interesting luncheon where Ellen Ratner, your friend and my friend, who used to run Talk Media News Service, Ellen had decided to give Rush Limbaugh, they gave an award at the Talkers Magazine annual luncheon in New York, and she decided to give the award to him and got the wrath of a few people. But then she got defended, too, by some progressives because the idea was not to necessarily have agreed, but to say who had made significant strides in radio. So I was there when he got the award. Something that's kind of not known about him, in private settings, he was an introvert.
I don't doubt that.
It shocked me.
Yeah, I actually had a conversation today with someone who, knew the representative from the union that he was a member of in Kansas City. And they had nothing but horrible things to say about it. But that was one of them. That he was not, the outgoing type. But here's the thing: I'm not going to speak ill of the dead, other than he did more in my lifetime to change the direction of the country. Some will say for the better. I say for much, much, much worse. But he did have an impact.
Well, Axelrod said it very appropriately today because there were some people that were coming out and saying some things, about the deceased. But Axelrod said whether you agreed with him or you didn't, he absolutely had this unbelievable movement, which kind of led to Trump. himself,
Yes, it did. But, the other part of this is, I don't know if you'll agree or not, he was the product of huge money that really moved him in that direction. This wasn't just one guy who came out of nowhere. This was somebody who had, this was part of a movement. He was put out as the face of a movement. And he was very talented. He was good at what he did, but ultimately he was the face and the voice of huge moneyed interests that were hell bent on dividing us and tearing us apart.
Well, it was always interesting because you're right. He did that. I remember at that New York luncheon, he had said, you all. He was talking to the whole group of about 200 of us. He said, "Y'all better come into reality. Your mission is to get the listener to take Tide off the shelf because Tide is paying for you to get your stuff out there." It's not. It was just very interesting. He related the economic, side to it, and no question he had backers. In fact, Ellen Ratner, I think, had a book 1, 2, 3 talk, but Ellen used to complain about the fact that why could the right make all of this investment behind the scenes in radio and the left wasn't doing it. She complained about that probably 15, 20 years ago.
No, I've been saying that ever since I've been doing this, that the right invests in this medium heavily, as they did. Limbaugh, is credited for saving AM radio because they were buying time on every station that would sell it to them. They had that kind of funding, and in huge rates. Because look, there was the investment there that the left never did. Labor and the left never invested in this medium, and they lost. And sadly, they lost at their peril because Limbaugh did rise to incredible success, and did he, as I said today, he was the Father Cawthorne of his time. It just was what it was.
Right, and there were discussions I remember with labor leaders because I used to deal quite a lot in Congress with labor leaders, and there were certain huge amounts of money invested to get people to write letters and things, but a lot of the labor guys used to complain, why don't they make that investment to do the education out on the radio waves?
Yep. So I guess before we move on, last question on this, who's going to replace him? I mean, this is a huge chair to fill, and I'm not making a fat joke because I'm still probably bigger than he was.
Right.
Who replaces him?
I don't know. I mean, you're right. The question is who replaced him. I don't know. Ben Shapiro has a podcast he's kind of followed, but Limbaugh was a bit unique. I don't think there is a name out there right now that does replace him that I know of.
No, I can't listen to Shapiro. He's kind of like a little weasel on crack.
Well, he talks fast.
Yeah,
Limbaugh had a flow of his tone, but a different type of cadence to his voice.
I mean, I didn't agree with Limbaugh much on anything, but I could listen to him for a little bit. I can't even tolerate Shapiro.
Mm-hmm. That's what I say. Ben Shapiro's anyone that kind of comes to mind that's known, but I just don't think there is anybody right now. Maybe somebody will be out there on the left. You never know.
Yeah, nobody on the left's going to fill that seat.
No, you never know.
The moneyed interests behind that are never going to allow that to happen. And I'll tell a story. There's a station in my area where I reached out when Michael Savage was thrown off the air.
Okay.
And the big station in my area, I reached out to it. I said, "Hey, how much to put our program during that time when he's in hiatus?" And I was told there isn't enough money.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, because they're formatted. It is what, and this is where I think the conversation now is a good conversation to have because, everyone that I know who are big Limbaugh fans and were, right-wing conservative talk fans were like, well, the market has decided. And you go, no, the market didn't decide. This is what's been shoveled in front of you for so long that this is the dinner that you're used to.
Sure. Absolutely.
All right, let's get to the other stuff today. Texas. What a horrible situation that is.
Oh, it is. It's just it's unreal. The White House pushed back today at the renewable, blaming on the renewables, the renewable energy. I saw that in the story. But Texas is just a terrible situation.
I mean, if this goes back for me to all that deregulation of the 90s, or do you disagree? Because I look at, like Pennsylvania here, we deregulated our energy back in the 90s, much like Texas did. And now we've got, all these wonderful choices that don't save us any money, but keep us in a state of being much more vulnerable, just like Texas is. Is there a point, do you think, that we rethink that kind of, creating these markets that, in these moments are going to fail? Because they're saying half of Texas's energy suppliers are about to fail.
Right. People, they beat that drum constantly about, you deregulate and then you have more competition, and therefore you as the consumer are better off. And it's not necessarily the case. I mean, it's been proven time after time in a lot of mediums. Again, no one's for monopolies, but when you break it down to so many different levels, you are bound to have people fail, bound to, that are not going to survive.
I'm not overly concerned about monopoly, to be honest, on a utility, because you know what? I got one set of wires coming into my house. It's not like I have multiple wires that I can choose from. I got one power company coming in. Here in Pennsylvania, I get people calling me all the time. Hey, do you want to switch over, to this company who, we buy our energy from over here? And I want the guy who's got the wires connected to my house giving me the energy. This way I know where it comes from.
Right. Well, exactly. Yeah. And now the Texas governor, Greg Abbott, he's a Republican, and he blamed the ERCOT, which is the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, and he's blaming the blackout on them. And he had said about the frozen turbines, and then how this shows the Green New Deal would be deadly for the United States, is what Abbott was saying. Our wind and solar got shut down, and there were collectively only 10% of the power on the grid. But I think it's due to a lot of the small providers that can't provide at this point in time. They just prove they can't provide during some type of crisis.
Yeah, I mean, or they're just not going to pay it. I mean, right. You saw the numbers have quadrupled from what they what they had planned out to pay, and this is where they're all going to go. They're all going to go belly up. And this is one of those things where I think people should be investigating. I think Ken Paxton and Greg Abbott and the rest of them, instead of being on Twitter, saying things about, about solar panels and windmills, should be investigating these people who are running these groups, because people died because of this. Right.
Well, they're also hitting Ted Cruz, Senator Cruz, because he was making light of California's power outages last year. In tweets, he actually accused President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, both candidates at that time, of wanting to make California's failed energy policy the nationwide standard. And when they criticized his past tweets, his quote was, he had no defense. That was his quote.
There is no defense.
Right.
You're wrong. I mean, this is that's probably the best thing he's ever said. And I wish someone was actually hitting him. I know that's mean, but it is what it is. Here's some good news, though.
New haircut too, by the way.
Yeah, I don't even want to start with that. But I do have a little bit of good news, and I want to end on some good news. Okay. The World Health Organization is saying that the coronavirus new cases declining. We may be getting a little bit better.
You can tell, and it's not where people are taking off their masks, because some people said, well, a month ago people were taking off their masks. Well, that's not the key to it. The key to it is to get the vaccine out there, and also worldwide. And, of course, we reconnected worldwide with the vaccine movement, which we had been out of it. And then people say, well, we got to take care of ourselves first. We are. I mean, we're taking care of the United States. There's been more vaccines, ordered, another couple 100 million vaccines by the Biden administration. But you can just see where statistically it's starting to wear down, luckily, on the viruses, and through the inoculations and more people being inoculated. And also, it's got to be a worldwide movement. You got to do it around the world. And there's still going to be some nations way far behind, but I think that you're right. It is showing a decline, which is absolutely fantastic.
Now, let me ask you about your experience. Since we're talking about the virus, you got the shot.
Right.
Finally, after a second time down to the Kroger, you got the shot.
I have a quick story, by the way. I got the shot. I did. I went in on Monday and took a selfie, put it on Facebook.
Saw it.
Which I had some people on Facebook say, well, good luck, Bob. I'm like, okay. I have one friend that wrote to me and said, you may be dead in 3 days. Well, this is the third day, so I haven't made that yet. But I went and got the shot and took a selfie of it. And then I got a notice for my second shot on March 15th. And I actually called Kroger today and I said, look, I don't mind driving for the shot, but you've got me scheduled in Wichita, Kansas. And they said, what? And I said, oh, yeah, and I did. My email says Wichita, Kansas, so they have corrected that. I'll be in St. Clairsville, Ohio.
All right.
But I got it, and I had a little bit of soreness on the site, but I didn't have any fevers or chills or anything of that nature. My daughter-in-law and son have had it, and same thing. My daughter-in-law had a little bit of soreness. My daughter-in-law, my dad, 97, got it. He had nothing, zero.
Wow. Give me 97 of those years.
Yeah, nothing. And for me, a little soreness at the spot for 2 days it's okay. I'll take it.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, but let me go back to this so-called friend. What kind of friends do you got? Telling you you're going to be dead in 3 days?
Well, I have a very eclectic group. When something's posted on Facebook, way to the left and way to the right across the country or on my page. But no, I have a friend who has bought into the conspiracy theories, and then he wrote back and said, well, I think everybody in 7 years. And I finally said, are you intending to fly? He said, yes. I said, well, then if you are intending to fly, you will have to have the vaccine at some point in time. And he said, well, I guess I'll get it. I just want to see what happens to more people.
I just want to see if more. Yeah. And look, I'm okay with that. Do what you got to do, but don't keep saying this stupid stuff and then changing the dates. You're going to be dead in 3 days or 7 years. Well, I'm probably going to be dead in 7 or 10 years. Who knows?
It went from 3 to 7. I made my third day. There are people out there that of course, they bought into certain theories. Look, can someone pass from something? Yes, they could pass from a regular flu shot. Has statistically that happened? No. Have there been some isolated cases where people had some reactions in very few cases? Yes. But that's for the good of the cause, it is so low. That's why they have you sit for 15 minutes afterwards.
If you make it through the 15 minutes, you might be okay.
You're okay. You're all right. Yeah, if you make the 15, you're all right.
Or 3 to 7 years. 3 days to 7 years.
I passed my third. Now we'll talk in 7 years and see where I'm at.
See, now those people, I don't call them friends. I call those people acquaintances. I know them.
Oh, yeah. I've known this person forever, and he's just simply gotten worse over the years of buying into a lot of stuff. So, you can't have a conversation.
Wow. Scary stuff. But, Bob, I wish you the best. I hope you make it through the next couple of days. Because we want to have you back here on Friday.
Okay, I'll try.
Good stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney. No, serious. I know people like that too. In fact, I had the same kind of conversation. You're really going to get it? I go, yeah, as soon as I can. As soon as they go, hey, it's your turn. Here you go. Jab away. And they're like, it causes birth defects. I'm going, I've got 3 kids. I'm done. And I'm never going to have a child. So. And I'm going, I don't even know where the birth defect thing came from. You're going to have a child with a third arm. Well, that might be helpful. We may do better with a third arm. Although, my wife said it could be a boy with a third arm. That would be leg, however. So that's a little different. We need to take an anatomy and physiology course there. But it just is what it is. But yeah, with friends like that, who needs enemies? You're going to be dead in 3 days. Or my favorite one, I got this too. They're going to implant a chip in you. And they're going to be able to track you. I go, they don't need to implant a chip in me. I carry this cell phone that I paid $1,000 for. And I pay $300 a month so that I can have a plan that has a couple of phones on it. They don't need to chip me. I voluntarily carried a thing around that they can turn on and listen and follow and track and take all this stuff off of anytime they want. They don't need to chip us. We're basically giving them all of the information they want freely. That's the reality of how crazy things are. So when people start giving me the tinfoil hat stuff, I kind of got to question it. They really don't want to know, for the vast majority of people, what kind of proclivities you have in the dark. Just saying. Some other good news. Federal agents have seized 10 million fake N95 masks. There were 10 million counterfeit 3M brand N95 masks. The good folks at the Department of Homeland Security did find these people, and they're saying, look, you give these masks to people who are first responders, who are dealing with in a hospital setting with COVID patients, it could be deadly, could be dangerous. Personally, I think you find the people who did this, you bring them to public square, and you let people in public square deal with it. A good beating every once in a while, not a bad thing. And I know, that's horrible. No, I'm still. Every once in a while, someone needs to get a slap to put them back in line. If you're this kind of despicable, I don't know. I have very little hope for you. Now I wonder what kind of penalties they'll get. Again, this is corporate America. I'm sure they're going to figure a way out of it. They always do. But it just shows how just really sad things can really be. But yeah, lots to get to this week. More on what's going on in Texas tomorrow. We're going to talk a little bit more about the deregulation. I want to delve a little bit deeper in that because I think this is an opportunity. I think right now we could be looking at an opportunity to turn back, 30 years of bad policy. All of the conservative ideology that we've been swallowing these last 30 plus years. Maybe we should be re-examining in a way that we undo the damage that it's done. And, this kind of, deregulation of our public utilities, right up there with it. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at